Falcha Khair. Welcome to the Samhain edition of the NODCast. Today I thought we would do something a little different. Take a break from everything that we've been doing before and just enjoy. I came across this entry while I was reading the Celtic book of seasonal meditations, Celebrate the Traditions of the Ancient Celts by Claire Hamilton, and I thought it would make the best reading for this segment of the podcast. The book says, Samhain, pronounced Samhain, means summer's end. It was a lunar festival held at the time of the full moon at the end of October and marking the Celtic New Year. It lasted for about a week and corresponds to our modern-day celebrations of Halloween and All Hallows. In fact, many of the rituals attached to Halloween come from the ancient festival of Samhain. The Celts believed that at this crucial moment of the year, when the earth turned away from the light and began to embrace the darkness, the doors to the other world were opened, and the veil between this world and the realm of the spirits all but disappeared. Then the holy men and those who had prepared themselves were able to communicate with the spirits of the ancestors. This was considered an opportunity to reconnect with past loved ones, a time to learn from their instruction and guidance, and to commune with the next world. As time went on, the belief grew up that some of the spirits released at this time could be angry or malevolent. Rituals of appeasement or protection were devised, and the practice of arose of saning or blessing foods and objects that might be contaminated by such evil spirits. In the Celtic Christian times, this idea was turned into All Saints' Day, the day which drew down the purifying power and blessing of the saints to combat the release of the powers of darkness. For the ancient Celts, however, the festival of Samhain stood at the gateway of winter, the time of coldness and death, the season ruled by the Kelach, the old hag, dark face of the triple goddess. But it was also the time of the wisdom of the old crone, a time to consider the past and plan for the future, an opportunity to deepen spiritual understanding. It was a season to rest from outward activity, to go inward and work on the spirit, or simply to withdraw and conserve energy in order to become renewed and invigorated in the spring, like the crops themselves. Celtic lunar festivals were deeply connected with the agricultural round of the seasons and with the movements of cattle. At Samhain, herds of cattle and other livestock were brought into shelters for the winter, while the weaker animals were slaughtered and salted in preparation for the great feasts. All the harvest had to be gathered in by this time, anything remaining in the fields being forfeit to the Kelach. The season of darkness and apparent death were greatly revered, for it was understood that at this time the forces of nature were working particularly potently within the element of earth, empowering the seeds and grain and preparing them for germination in the spring. The festival of Samhain also symbolically reflected the phase when the moon was absent, the days of complete blackness. This was the origin of the idea of timelessness and the suspension of rule and order, which gave rise to the 3 days of misrule. At this time, men and women exchanged clothes, practical jokes were enacted, cattle were moved from one farm to another, and children went around the neighboring dwellings asking for gifts and food, and threatening mischief if they were not placated. This ritual survives today in the Halloween custom of trick-or-treating. This was also the time of the Great Assembly of Tara. Every 3 years, all the chieftains and nobles of Ireland gathered at the High King's Court to discuss and ratify the laws of the land. While the assembly was being held, all violence, stealing, or legal disputes were strictly forbidden, on pain of death. The assembly was held at Samhain because this was the time when the warring ceased between tribes. During the winter months, Celtic warriors desisted from fighting and hunting, and instead were billeted on various households where they spent their days feasting and being entertained by music and storytelling. Among those who had received a Druidic training riddling exchanges took place, in which meanings were conveyed on more than one level. At this time, too, plans were made for tribal alliances or for necessary warfare. Although the cold and darkness may seem harsh to a people who were closely involved with the land, as the season approached its shortest day, they began to prepare for the most important celebration of the year, the festival marking the rebirth of the sun after its sojourn in death and darkness. This was the midwinter solstice, the first of the fire festivals. The great tomb of Newgrange is constructed with special aperture for the first rays of the sun to shine through at the solstice and light the inner chamber. Behind the solar festival, which took place at the heart of the season of winter, lay the belief in the ritual of the death of the king, consort of the great goddess, who in herself represented all of nature. Annually, at the turning point of the year, she demanded the sacrifice of the king, her consort. Like the vegetation itself, he had to die before resurrected with the rising of the newborn sun on the 22nd of December. This concept also underlies the battle between the Oak King and the Holly King. At midwinter, the Holly King defeated the Oak, and at midsummer, the Oak King wrests the crown back from the Holly. Alongside the Holly, all evergreen trees were considered particularly sacred at this time. Holly and ivy were paired symbolically in terms of masculine and feminine forces, and the mistletoe was given particular reverence as the plant that descends from the heavens and germinated in the upper branches of the oak, the sacred tree of the Celts. The annual ritual of cutting the mistletoe from ring of oaks, a sacred druidic grove, has been described in detail by the Roman writer Pliny. This was performed at the winter solstice. The mistletoe being cut by a golden sickle and let fall onto a white sheet. After this, 2 white bulls were sacrificed to the gods, and the prayers were given for the renewed fertility of the earth. The mistletoe was not allowed to touch the ground, for it was the gift of regeneration from the god of the heavens. Although some of the rituals and sacrifices may seem primitive, in many ways Celtic spiritual understanding was very sophisticated for the Celts. For the Celts, darkness came before light and death before life, for they perceived this to be the nature of reality. No new life could be achieved without the experience of death, nor could light be appreciated without the corresponding power of darkness. Thus, their year began with the time of the death and darkness, the time of engendering, the time of gestation when the child was nurtured in the womb of the mother, the seed in the womb of the great Mother Earth. This was the beginning of all things. The meditations for the season focus on the themes of darkness and spiritual renewal, the element of earth and its related symbolism, the Cailleach and the wise crone, aspects of the goddess, the sacred properties of evergreen tree and winter hardy animals, bardic training, the power of the word, the language of Oyam, heroic feasting and riddling, tales of love and death and nature poems. Meditating on such stories, descriptions, and symbols will give us an insight into the mystical Celtic understanding of the gifts and challenges of the season. For a more in-depth look at the customs associated with Samhain and other sacred days in Ireland, we turn to the book I want to review for this podcast. The book is called The Year in Ireland by Kevin Danaher. This book is written in 1972 on the Irish calendar customs. It describes how the year, with its cycle of festivals and seasonal work, was observed in Ireland in the 19th and 20th centuries. The author draws on a wide variety of sources and on more than 30 years of research into Irish folk traditions. The book gives the reader an idea of how the year was for many of the inhabitants of Ireland that still followed the old traditions. You get the sense of what each strata of the community was up to at which time of the year. The book starts on St. Bridget's Day and goes on all the way to Christmas. It encompasses both pagan and Christian days and gives the activities associated with the said day. I really enjoyed reading the book because it gave me ideas on things that I would do on my own, rituals and celebrations. It gives the sense of the ebb and flow of the year and how the seasons were related to each other, and how one activity during a certain time can relate to another in another time. I think it's a must-read book for anyone who is interested in following an Irish path of spirituality, be it Christian or pagan. We've come to the trivia part of our podcast. Our trivia for this episode comes all the way from Normandy. Did you know that the first Normans were actually Vikings who had come and conquered that area and decided to settle there instead of moving on? The first ruler of that area from the Vikings was Rollo the Gangler, or Roller the Walker. It was said he was so big that he could not even ride a horse, and so he had to walk everywhere. After he conquered the area, he married the daughter of a French nobleman and learned how to live like a Frenchman, and this is the beginning of what we now today know as the Normans. And now for the Bardic Corner. Our poem also comes from the Celtic Book of Seasonal Meditations by Claire Hamilton, and it is entitled Holly. But before I give you the poem, let me tell you a little bit about it. Holly was known as Tinne in Old Irish or Gaelic, meaning fire, and it is linked with this element. It was a holly tree, evergreen, tenacious, a symbol of immortality. It was especially potent at midwinter when it had won the crown from the oak tree and began its half-yearly reign. At this season, it could be taken into the home both to perpetuate the powers of nature within it and to bring in elves and fairies at a time when their presence was believed to be beneficial to mortals. However, every last stick of greenery had to be removed by the festival of Imbolc in case the elements decided to remain in the house and cause mischief. The Holly King was originally the wild man or spirit of vegetation, later called the Green Man. And now the poem. Holly tree, with green leaves so bright, at the waning of the year you bring in the light. Holly tree, holy tree, with berries so red, at the waning of the year you wake from the dead. Holly tree, with blossoms so white, at the waning of the year you bring us new hope. Holly tree, holy tree, with your bitter bark, at the waning of the year you save us from the dark. Thank you for listening to our show, and I hope you have enjoyed all you heard. If you would like to have your poems featured in our podcast, then please send us an email. You can find the link on the webpage. We also welcome your feedback. So until next time, Slán go fóill!